Hello and welcome to Scary Stories. I'm your host, Re-Gor. Today, we are going to read from a series of books. This one is about the ghost of Frankenstein, and it's from Crestwood House. Can you see that there? I think you can. The Ghost of Frankenstein. What our goal here is, and what your goal should be as a parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent, would be to help these classic horror films live on. You know, we don't live in the day and age of 5 TV channels anymore where they showed us all the horror movies that we need to know. Now we live in the day of on-demand and 500 channels, and the kids are lost. They're not being taught the classic horror movies. So it's up to you, the parent, the grandparent, and the great-grandparent, to continue to keep these films alive, show them to your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and to read them these stories. And I'm going to help with that. I have a stack of books here about classic films, and I'm going to read them again today. We are reading The Ghost of Frankenstein with Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney Jr. So have your kids sit back and enjoy. It's kind of long. There will be breaks at the chapter breaks, so you can pause it and do what you got to do. And hopefully everyone will enjoy this reading. So we're going to continue here, and we're going to start with the prologue of Ghost of Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster has had more lives than a cat. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein in 1818. It told the story of the mad Dr. Heinrich Frankenstein. In the book, Frankenstein created a monster out of parts stolen from dead bodies. At the end, the monster and his creator both died in a terrible fire. Frankenstein was made into a movie in 1931. Movie fans loved the film. As a result, Universal Studios brought Frankenstein and his monster back in Bride of Frankenstein. The monster died again in that film, but the public wanted more. Son of Frankenstein was the next. In that film, Dr. Wolf Frankenstein learned that his father's monster was still alive. A mad shepherd named Re-Gor took Wolf to the monster, who had been sleeping for 25 years. Wolf awakened the monster, and the creature again started killing people. The film ended when Wolf shot Re-Gor and then pushed the monster into a pit of boiling sulfur. Was that the end of Frankenstein's monster? Perhaps it should have been, but the monster was still selling movie tickets. In Ghost of Frankenstein, the filmmakers bring Re-Gor back to rescue the monster. The faithful Re-Gor then decides that the monster needs a new brain. He takes the monster to Dr. Ludwig Frankenstein. Ludwig is another of Heinrich Frankenstein's sons. Like his famous father, Ludwig knows a lot about damaged brains. But whose brain would Ludwig use to save the monster? Let's find out. Chapter 1. The Curse Still Lives. Wolf Frankenstein's castle lay in ruins on its lonely hilltop. The stumps of blasted trees ringed the broken stones. A raven circled the tower, then headed westward into the sunset. Rats ran across the castle's dust-covered floors. Heavy cobwebs hung from the ceilings. The rats stopped suddenly, alert to danger. Strange, sad music came from deep within the castle walls. Re-Gor was playing his flute in Frankenstein's ruined laboratory. His crooked hands ached as he held on to his beloved flute. Tears of anger ran down the shepherd's cheeks. He was thinking about the night Wolf Frankenstein pushed the monster into the pit of liquid sulfur. Perhaps the monster can hear the music, Re-Gor told himself. The thought made Re-Gor feel better. He played faster. The music sounded like the wind whistling through a graveyard. When he was finished, Re-Gor put his flute away and left by a secret tunnel. That same night, people in a nearby village were holding a meeting. One man stood up to speak. "There's a curse on our village," he cried. "It is the curse of Frankenstein." "Hans is right. No one will buy what we make," the village shoemaker said. "My children cry in their sleep. They are hungry because there's no bread." Other voices joined in. "It is the curse of Frankenstein," they shouted. The village mayor stood up. "This is foolish talk," he roared. "You all know the monster's dead." "Perhaps the monster's dead," answered Hans, "but Re-Gor is still alive. His neck is twisted and broken. Dr. Frankenstein shot him, but he still lives. People have seen him." Re-Gor's neck was twisted and broken. Great Bela Lugosi performance there. Probably one of his best. "You talk like children," the mayor laughed. "If you see anything at all, it is only a ghost." If the mayor had looked up, he would have changed his mind. Igor was watching them through a hole in the roof. "We must dynamite the castle," the blacksmith broke in. "That's the only way to end the Frankenstein curse." The crowd took up the chant. "Dynamite the castle! Dynamite the castle!" they cried. Up above them, Igor's eyes burned with hatred. He dropped down from the roof and headed back to the castle. An hour later, the villagers reached the castle with a wagon full of dynamite. As they unloaded the wagon, Hans looked up. Igor was pushing a huge stone off the edge of the tower. The stone crashed down, just missing Hans and the others. Hans saw that it was Igor who was trying to kill them. "Igor's alive!" he screamed. "Blow him up along with the castle!" The men carried boxes of dynamite up to the castle wall. Igor saw the danger. He quickly climbed down to the laboratory and hid near the sulfur pit. The dynamite blew the tower to pieces. The men cheered and set off more explosions. Soon nothing was left of the castle. The villagers slapped each other on the back. "Igor's really dead this time," they told each other. Deep in the ruins, Igor lay with a wooden beam across his chest. Huge blocks of yellow sulfur had been blown out of the pit. A hand was sticking out of one block. Igor's heart beat faster. Could that be the monster's hand? The mighty fingers moved and stretched like a giant waking from a long sleep. Chapter 2. Igor's Plan. With a shout, Igor pushed the beam off his chest. Then he pulled the block of sulfur apart. As he had hoped, the hand belonged to the monster. When the last piece of sulfur fell off, the monster stood up. "My friend," Igor shouted, "how lucky we are! Frankenstein's bullets didn't kill me, and you lived after being thrown into the pit. The sulfur kept you alive!" Igor patted his friend's arms. The monster's hair and eyebrows were burned away. The yellow sulfur dust covered his torn clothes. He seemed as weak as a child. The monster seemed weak as a child. Sulfur save Frankenstein monster. "I have missed you," Igor said in a soft, loving voice. He jumped when more stones fell from the ceiling. "Come, we will go to my cave in the hills. We will be safe there." Igor pulled at the monster's arm. Slowly the giant creature followed him into the secret tunnel. He moved like a figure in a nightmare. The tunnel led to a graveyard. Igor leads the monster to safety. A storm was about to break when Igor and the monster stepped out into the cold night air. The moon slid behind heavy black clouds. Igor led the monster into the hills. Thunder boomed and lightning flashed. Rain fell heavy in drops. Igor's cave was in sight when lightning struck a nearby tree. Igor ran for the cave, but the monster looked upwards. A smile softened his ugly face. The monster climbed to the top of a large rock. He raised his arms to the sky. Almost at once, a giant lightning bolt struck him. The lightning turned the monster into a living torch. His hot sparks flew in all directions. Igor covered his eyes. Surely the lightning would kill the monster. But when he looked again, his friend was still standing. The bolts in his neck glowed red hot. He looked strong and happy. "Now I see," Igor called. "Dr. Frankenstein was your father, but the lightning was your mother. She has come down to give you new energy and to make you well." But the monster was still not himself. He moved about trying to catch more lightning. Igor decided that his friend needed medical care. He caught the monster and held on. "Come with me," Igor begged. "I will take you to Ludwig Frankenstein. He knows all his father's secrets. I will make him fix you. Then you will live forever." The name of Frankenstein brought a low animal growl from the monster. He still hated the man who had created him. Igor pulled him down the hill. "Soon you'll have strength of 100 men," he said. Igor's own madness showed in his excited words. "Then we will come back to destroy the fools who tried to kill us." Chapter 3. The monster makes a new friend. The next day was sunny and warm. Children were playing in the main street of the village of Visaria when Igor and the monster arrived. Igor learned that Dr. Frankenstein lived nearby. The children chased after the monster. Some older boys shouted and made faces at him. Others were frightened. One pretty little girl didn't seem afraid. She bounced a rubber ball and smiled at the monster. A boy kicked the ball out of the girl's hand. It flew up to a roof and got stuck in a chimney. The girl started to cry. A low growl sounded deep in the monster. Children all ran away. Except for the little girl. She pointed up at her ball. The monster picked up the girl and began climbing up the outside of the building. The children's screams brought the villagers out of their homes. A man grabbed at the monster. The creature brushed him off with a sweep of his arm. The blow broke the man's neck. With the child in his arms, the monster reached the roof. He picked up the ball and gave it to the girl. "This is fun," she told him. Her smile made him feel warm inside. One of the villagers aimed a rifle at the monster. The girl's father pushed him away. "No," he ordered. "You might kill my little Cloestine." The father turned and shouted up to his daughter. "Cloestine, ask him to bring you down." "Take me back to Daddy," Cloestine told the monster. He seemed to understand. Carefully, he started back down. As soon as Cloestine was back in her father's arms, the village police jumped on the monster. He fought back, but there were too many of them. They beat him with clubs and took him off to jail. The police grab the monster. Re-Gor was hiding in the doorway. He knew that only Dr. Frankenstein could help the monster now. Dr. Frankenstein was trying a new operation that morning. He removed a man's diseased brain, repaired it, then put it back. Dr. Boehmer and Dr. Kettering helped him with the surgery. Re-Gor arrived and asked a maid if he could see Dr. Frankenstein. While he waited, he wandered around the house. By chance, he overheard Dr. Boehmer talking to Dr. Kettering. "I did that same operation 10 years ago," Boehmer said in a jealous voice. "But I made one mistake and a man died. They took my license away. Now I can't operate or do research." Frankenstein was working in his study. He looked up to see his daughter Elsa come in with a young man. Eric Ernst was a handsome local lawyer. Eric told Frankenstein about the strange events in the village. "Please come and examine this man," Eric asked the doctor. "He's a giant, a monster. You must tell us what to do." Frankenstein thought about his father. Could the monster still be alive? "I'll be there as soon as I can," he told Eric. "Now Elsa will give you some tea." He smiled as Elsa led Eric out by the hand. He knew the young people were in love. The maid came in. "There's a strange man waiting to see you," she told him. "He says his name is Re-Gor." The name sent chills down Frankenstein's spine. He knew about Re-Gor from reading his brother's notebooks. What did the mad shepherd want? Kettering tells Boehmer not to be jealous of Dr. Frankenstein. Chapter 4. The Monster Escapes. Re-Gor's long hair and beard gave him a wild, savage look. "Well, Dr. Frankenstein," he said at last, "how does it feel to face Re-Gor? You thought your brother killed me, didn't you?" Frankenstein refused to answer. Re-Gor laughed deep in his throat and moved closer. "The monster is with me," he said. "He is the one the police are holding in jail." "What do you want, Re-Gor?" Frankenstein asked coldly. "Move the monster here for medical care. His brain is sick. You must call down the lightning to make him well," Re-Gor replied. "My father died because of that monster," Frankenstein said. "Why would I help you do this evil thing?" "You don't have any choice," Re-Gor said. "If you refuse, I will tell the people that your father created the monster. Everyone will hate you. You and your daughter's lives will be ruined." "It seems I have no choice," Frankenstein sighed. "I will do as you wish," he said. He pushed Re-Gor toward the door. "Now get out of here. I have work to do." When Re-Gor left, Frankenstein took out 2 old notebooks. His father had written the first one. The second was signed by his brother Wolf. Together, the notebooks told the monster's story. Frankenstein blew away the dust and started reading. That afternoon, the police led the monster into the village courtroom. Heavy chains held the creature's wrists. The monster smiled when he saw little Cloestine sitting with her father. The other villagers shouted insults at the unhappy creature. Eric Ernst stepped forward. "What is your name?" Eric Ernst asked the monster. The monster grunted. The judge saw that the prisoner was not able to talk. He called for Cloestine and asked her to speak to the monster. At the trial, Cloestine tries to help the monster. Cloestine sat on the monster's lap. The creature smiled with pleasure, but he could not answer her questions. Just then, Dr. Frankenstein entered the room. The monster heard Eric say his name. He remembered that Re-Gor said this man would help him. The monster held out his arms to the doctor. "He seems to know you, Dr. Frankenstein," the judge said. Frankenstein ignored his promise to Re-Gor. "I don't know anything about this man," he said. "I want nothing to do with him." Frankenstein's lie turned the monster's joy to anger. The doctor wasn't going to help him. He put Cloestine down and lunged forward. The chain snapped as he reached for Frankenstein. A guard fired at him, but the bullets didn't stop the monster. The guard screamed as the creature crushed him in one strong hand. From outside came the sound of Re-Gor's flute. The monster forgot Frankenstein and climbed out of the courtroom window. Re-Gor was waiting with a wagon he had stolen. He helped the monster climb aboard. Then Re-Gor brought the horses to a gallop. After they were out of the village, Re-Gor and the monster jumped off the wagon. The horses raced on by themselves, the two friends under a hedge. In a little while, many of the villagers rode past their hiding place. Re-Gor smiled at the monster. They were safe once more. And here we have the monster breaks his chains. Chapter 5. The monster kills again. All that night, the villagers looked for Re-Gor and the monster. Elsa watched the torches of the searchers from her father's house. The lights seemed to be everywhere. Elsa went to her father's study. The two notebooks were still on his desk. She started reading Baron Frankenstein's notes on his work. As she read, she learned how her grandfather had made the monster. A look of horror crept over her face. At the same time, the village council was questioning Dr. Ludwig Frankenstein. "You work with crazy people," Eric Ernst said. "We hoped that you might know something about this madman." Dr. Frankenstein was on his guard. "I will say it again," he said. "I don't know anything about the creature." Eric wouldn't accept that. "Surely you know that the shepherd called Re-Gor asked for you when he came to the village," he said. "I think he was bringing his friend to you for treatment." Frankenstein glared at Eric. "Are you saying that this is all my fault?" he asked. Before Eric could reply, the village police came in from their search. "We're chasing the devil himself," one man complained. "The creature cannot be captured." Eric frowned and ended the meeting. He couldn't do anything more until the monster was found. Back at the Frankenstein house, Elsa finished the first notebook. Through a window, she saw a lightning storm sweep across the fields. She picked up the second book. As she turned the pages, she heard the sound of a flute. Elsa felt her hands tremble. Her uncle's notebook had warned her about Re-Gor's music. Elsa sees a shadow outside her window. Ooh. A shadow moved outside the window. She turned and saw a giant creature looking at her. She knew it must be the monster. Swiftly, she locked the doors and windows. When her father came in, Elsa rushed into his arms. "I've read the notebook," she cried, "and I've seen the monster." Dr. Frankenstein tried to calm her, but just then a scream echoed through the house. Out in the hall, they found Kettering's body. "Someone has choked him to death," Frankenstein said in a horrified voice. "Elsa, go to your room." His warning came too late. The monster had been waiting for them. The creature grabbed the girl. With Elsa under one arm, he walked stiffly toward the doctor. Re-Gor was right behind him. Frankenstein whirled and ran into his laboratory. He slammed the door and pulled a lever. The monster and Re-Gor tried to leave with Elsa. Out in the hallway, the monster heard a hissing sound. Clouds of sleeping gas filled his lungs. The monster fell asleep, and Elsa and Re-Gor behind him. Quickly, Dr. Frankenstein turned on fans to blow the gas away. Then he carried Elsa to his study. A few breaths of pure oxygen soon brought her back to her senses. Elsa looked at her father with troubled eyes. "The past has returned to haunt us," she said. "There's only one thing to do. The monster must be destroyed." Dr. Frankenstein looked defeated. "My father tried to kill it, and my brother. It cannot be killed." "There's a way," Elsa told him. "Grandfather made the monster piece by piece. Take him apart the same way. It's the only way to right a great wrong." Chapter 6. A Ghost Speaks. Dr. Frankenstein was proud that his father had made this giant. I am an expert on the human brain, he thought. Perhaps I can finish my father's work. But then he remembered Elsa's strong words. She's right. I must destroy him, he decided. Frankenstein felt sad as he tied the creature to a steel table. Just as he finished, the monster woke up. With a roar, the creature broke one of the straps. Frankenstein ducked under the huge arm as he wrapped wires around the bolts in the creature's neck. When he turned on the current, the monster became quiet. The monster reaches for Frankenstein, but misses. Frankenstein walked to a control box. As he pulled a lever, a pale face appeared before him. It was his father's ghost. My son, do not destroy the life I created, the ghost said. But the monster brings harm to everything it touches, Frankenstein protested. The ghost stared at his son with very sad, haunted eyes. That's only because I gave it a criminal brain by mistake. But what if the monster had a good brain, a brain worth saving? The ghost faded away. Frankenstein smiled as he thought about his father's words. Father, I'll give the monster a good brain. The loving brain of a man of science, he whispered. Not far away, Dr. Bowman was taking care of Re-Gor. The gas didn't hurt you, he told the shepherd. Now tell me, is that creature the monster that old Baron Frankenstein made? Re-Gor nodded. And are you a helper here? He asked. A jealous look swept over Bowman's face. Yes, that's true, he said. But once I was the master and Frankenstein was my helper. I made one mistake and I lost everything. Re-Gor decided to use Bowman's jealousy for his own purposes. Before he could say anything, a humming sound filled the room. The generators are running, Bowman said. Let's see what's going on. They found Frankenstein in the operating room. Bright flashes of electricity lit up the monster's scarred face. Jagged bolts of man-made lightning shot from one machine to another. Re-Gor was so happy he danced up and down. You are doing what I asked, he said. You are giving him new life. Frankenstein went on with his work. I'm making him strong so the operation will be successful, he said without looking at Re-Gor. I'm going to give him a new brain. Whose brain? Bowman asked. Then he knew the answer. You're going to give him Kettering's brain. Yes, Frankenstein replied. Kettering's brain will live on in the body of the monster that killed him. The monster will become loving and kind, just like Kettering. Re-Gor didn't want the monster to be kind. Don't change him, he cried. Don't take my friend away. He's all that I have. Frankenstein brushed Re-Gor aside. He cannot stay like this, he said. Either he gets a new brain, or he must be destroyed. Re-Gor's face lit up as he thought of a new plan. Put my brain into his body, he begged. My body is useless because your brother shot me. You owe me that much. Frankenstein knew that putting Re-Gor's evil brain in the monster's body would be a giant mistake. He went on with his work. We'll operate tomorrow night, he told them. Re-Gor hid in a corner. I have to make him use my brain, he told himself. Perhaps I can trick Bowman into helping me. Re-Gor begs Frankenstein to put his brain into the monster's body. Chapter 7. Eric finds an empty cell. Dr. Frankenstein moved Re-Gor and the monster to a hidden dungeon. He was busy the next day. Drawings of the brain covered his desk as he planned the operation. Dr. Bowman worked on the equipment. Both men were tired and nervous. That afternoon, Frankenstein visited the monster. When he reached the dungeon, Re-Gor was talking to the creature. The doctor stood outside the cell and listened. Do you understand? Re-Gor asked. You will have a new brain. A good brain. He touched the stitches on the monster's forehead. The monster grunted. He looked pleased. When Frankenstein entered the cell, the creature held out his arms in welcome. He thought Frankenstein was a friend. Soon, you will be truly human, Frankenstein said. You will have a good brain. Re-Gor smiled a secret smile. He had a plan the doctor didn't know about. Re-Gor didn't know that the monster was slowly thinking out a plan of his own. The night fell swiftly in the laboratory. Electric motors hummed their powerful song. Frankenstein and Bowman worked swiftly, making everything ready. Elsa came in. Father, Eric and the police chief are here to see you. Eric and the police have come to search the house. Frankenstein had to see them. He met the two village men in the study. Eric wanted to look through the house. We have searched every barn and haystack, he said. No one has seen the monster. Someone must be hiding him. Frankenstein thought of a way to get rid of his visitors. He pretended to be upset. Are you saying that I'm hiding the madman? Perhaps you would like to search my house, he stared at Eric. But if you do, you will never be welcome here again. Eric did not want to risk losing Elsa. We'll take your word, Doctor, but may I speak to Dr. Kettering at the moment? Kettering left early this morning, Frankenstein said quickly. There was an illness in his family. This cannot be, the police chief cut in. We're watching all routes out of this area. My men would have seen him leaving. Eric glanced at Elsa. She looked away. I'm sorry, but I must do my duty, he said. We will search the house. Frankenstein nodded and led them through the house. He didn't think anyone knew about the dungeon hidden deep under the laboratory, but Eric had studied a plan of the house. He quickly found the secret door. Please show us the dungeon, he asked. Frankenstein said a silent prayer and followed the men down the stone steps. Eric and the police chief switched on their flashlights. Frankenstein got ready to close the cell door on them as soon as they spotted the monster. The lights cut through the darkness. The beams showed only a pile of straw in an empty cell. Eric turned to Frankenstein. I'm sorry, Doctor, he said. Frankenstein turned and led them out of the dungeon. I warned you not to doubt my word, he snapped. But to himself he muttered, Where did Re-Gor and the monster go? Chapter 8. Re-Gor's Gift. The monster was carrying out his own plan. He went to the village and climbed into Closteen's bedroom window. In the tiny room, he looked even bigger and clumsier than usual. A music box fell off the table as he brushed past. It began to play. The music woke the girl. She smiled as the creature ran his fingers gently through her hair. Re-Gor's music drifted on the wind. The monster knew that he had to go. He picked up the girl and started out. As he left, he knocked over an oil-burning lamp. The hot oil spread across the floor, starting a fire. By the time the policeman saw the fire, the monster was on his way back to Frankenstein's house. Dr. Boehmer saw the monster carry Closteen into the house. The sight of the child gave him a shock. He caught hold of Re-Gor. You were mad to let him take the girl? Let him? Re-Gor laughed. No one can stop him when he wants to do something. But I don't know what he wants with her. The monster heard the question. He put his hand on the girl's head. Then he pointed to his own forehead. No, you can't have her brain. That would kill her, Re-Gor said. You don't want to kill your little friend. The monster only held Closteen tighter. Re-Gor tried again. I've a better idea, he said. You will have my brain. I will die to give you a good brain. The monster didn't like that idea. He headed for the laboratory. Re-Gor ran ahead of him and tried to hold the door open. The monster gave the door a mighty pull. The swinging door caught Re-Gor and smashed him into the wall. He fell unconscious. Boehmer carried him away. The monster wandered through the house, looking for Dr. Frankenstein. He finally found him in the hallway, talking to Elsa. Closteen was crying. And here we have Dr. Frankenstein pretends to go along with the monster's plan in order to get Closteen to safety. Elsa fought down her fear and walked toward the monster, but the monster wouldn't give the girl to her. He pointed to his forehead again. Frankenstein understood the monster's terrible plan. He pretended to agree. Give her to Elsa, he told the creature. Elsa will prepare her for the operation. But you must come with me. The monster agreed. Quickly, Elsa took the waiting room. Frankenstein locked the heavy door. Then he led the monster to the laboratory. The monster went willingly. He trusted Frankenstein. Frankenstein prepared the monster for the operation. When he was ready, he told Boehmer to get Kettering's brain. While Boehmer was gone, he removed the old brain from the monster's head. Re-Gor was waiting for Boehmer. He worked on the doctor's jealousy. Use my brain instead of Kettering's. With my brain and that great body, I will rule the world. And when I do, I will put you in charge of all medical research. Boehmer was tempted. But the operation may not work, he said. Then you would have died for nothing. Re-Gor pointed to his crippled body. I would rather die than live on like this, he said. Boehmer couldn't resist the offer. I'll do it, he said. The world will be sorry they didn't recognize my genius. Sparks and flames were ringing the monster's body when Boehmer brought in Igor's brain. Frankenstein carefully placed the brain in the monster's head. He couldn't tell that it wasn't Kettering's brain. What will Kettering think when he wakes up in his new body? Frankenstein wondered. Will he thank us? Or will living in this human junk heap make him angry? Chapter 9. It's time to tell the truth. The next morning, Dr. Frankenstein unlocked the waiting room. Clostein was asleep on a couch. The next morning, Dr. Frankenstein tells Elsa what he has done. Elsa turned away when her father tried to give her a hug. I'm sorry, Elsa, he said, but I had to be sure you were safe, and I didn't want you to try to stop the operation. You're just like my grandfather, she said with a shudder. I helped you cover up Kettering's death so you'd have time to destroy the monster, but you couldn't resist the chance to operate on your father's creation. It's much more than that, he protested. If the operation succeeds, Kettering will live forever. Think of it, my dear. Someday, because of what we have done, no one will have to die. Elsa felt better for a moment. Then she realized what he was saying. Father, what have you done? She demanded. Don't you see? Dr. Kettering's brain lives on in the monster's body. When the monster wakes up, he will have all of Kettering's goodness. Elsa knew now that her father was mad. The child and I are leaving this house, she said firmly. No, you cannot go, he said. You must stay until I know the operation was a success. Even then, no one must know why the child is here. Now, take her up to your bedroom. Elsa obeyed. She didn't know what else to do. Later on, I will find a way to help Clostein escape, she thought. When she was gone, Frankenstein looked in on the monster. He was sleeping peacefully, his head covered with bandages. Boehmer was sitting by the bed. I don't expect him to wake up for many days, Frankenstein said. Call me if anything happens. Dr. Frankenstein and Boehmer check in on the monster. The days passed slowly. In the village, people tried to figure out where the monster was hiding. Finally, Clostein's father gathered in a crowd of village men around him. It's time to take action, he shouted. My daughter's bones were not found in the ashes of the fire. I believe that my little one was stolen. It was the monster, someone called out. Yes, others joined in. Frankenstein's monster has killed too many people. The father continued, and do you know why we can't find the monster? It's because Frankenstein is hiding him. The police are helpless. We must take the law into our own hands. The people were eager for revenge. They picked up weapons and marched out of the village. Eric saw them leave and worried that Elsa might get hurt. He jumped on his horse and beat the mob to Frankenstein's house. The villagers found him waiting when they arrived. Go home, Eric demanded. You are breaking the law. Get out of our way, Clostein's father said. You're in love with Elsa Frankenstein. You can't be trusted. Eric saw that the crowd was almost out of control. He begged them to wait while he talked to Dr. Frankenstein. If Frankenstein is hiding the monster, he must give him up. If he refuses, you can take any action you want. The men agreed to wait. Eric went inside to talk to Frankenstein. You are in danger, he told the scientists. If you don't give up the monster, the people will tear your house apart. Elsa joined the two men. She stood close to Eric. It's time to tell the truth, father, she said. Outside, the mob was growing restless. Men were pounding on the gates. Yes, perhaps you are right, Frankenstein said. Come with me. He turned and led Elsa and Eric toward the laboratory. Chapter 10. The world is in danger. Elsa and Eric waited at the laboratory door. Inside, they could see the monster sitting up in bed. Dr. Boehmer was standing next to him. Is he awake? Is he making sense when he talks? Frankenstein asked. Boehmer nodded. You see, Eric, Frankenstein called excitedly, this is no longer a monster. This is Kettering. Kettering's body is dead, but his brain lives on. I have repaired the evil my father did. Frankenstein spoke to the monster. Who am I? He asked. You are Dr. Frankenstein, the monster replied. And you are Dr. Kettering, Frankenstein said proudly. The monster laughed loudly. His laugh was more like a snarl. No, you're wrong, he said. I am not Kettering. I am Igor! What have I done? Frankenstein moaned. The ego monster was enjoying the moment. Now I am stronger than everyone else. I will soon rule the world! Frankenstein turned to Bomer. It's your fault, Bomer. You gave me Igor's brain instead of Kettering's. Now I've made a monster 100 times worse than the one my father made. The ego monster picked up Frankenstein and threw him to a corner. Then he heard the mob as it broke into the front door of the house. Igor's quick-thinking brain began making plans to deal with the new danger. Eric didn't wait. He pushed Elsa out of the laboratory and bolted the door behind them. We must stop the villagers, he told her. The monster's too strong for them. Inside the laboratory, the ego monster remembered what Frankenstein had done. Turn on the gas jets, Bomer, he ordered. We will put all of these fools to sleep, and then we will kill them. The plan was a good one. Igor's brain was working all too well. Eric stopped the mob in the hallway. Gas, go back, he warned. In a few seconds you'll all be asleep. Just then, a maid carried Cloestine down the stairs. Everyone cheered. Happy now, the crowd turned back toward the front door. Eric and Elsa warned the villagers to leave. Eric and Elsa were caught behind the pushing, shoving crowd. I must go back for my father, Elsa sobbed. No, it's too late, Eric replied. Your father would rather die knowing he's created such a terrible monster. Gas began to seep into the hall. Elsa felt dizzy. Eric carried her outside. In the laboratory, the ego monster was staggering like a punch-drunk fighter. Bomer! Frankenstein! I can't see! He screamed. What have you done to me? Frankenstein realized what was wrong. Everyone makes mistakes, he shouted joyfully. I forgot that the monster's blood won't feed a normal brain. Igor's brain is dying. Bomer took the ego monster's arm and tried to lead him to safety. The blind creature struck out at him. Bomer flew across the room and crashed into a wall of electrical switches. The ego monster strikes out at Bomer. Electricity crackled and sparked. Piece by piece, the equipment exploded. Flames shot into the night sky. Out on the lawn, the villagers watched the fireworks. People screamed when the giant form of the Igor monster appeared at a window. Then the flames caught him. He fell back into the room. Eric took Elsa's hand and led her away. Don't look back, he told her. Your grandfather died in the same kind of fire that has killed your father. Now it's up to us to go on with our lives. Ahead of them, the first golden light of sunrise lit up the darkness. Eric and Elsa walked on into the new day. As the monster tries to get away from the fire. Well, I hope you enjoyed that reading of The Ghost of Frankenstein from 1942, a great movie, which, again, I think all parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents should show their kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids all these classic movies. We're going to continue to read these stories. We got a stack of them. We've got about 8 of them, 8 more stories to read, plus a bunch of other ones that aren't about movies, but they are about the classic monsters. So if we can do this recording again without all the clanking and banging in the background, you'll enjoy it even better. Thank you.